You ever notice people can say absolutely nothing and still say everything? That's the funny thing about silence. Sometimes silence is louder than the words we're desperate to hear. And when it comes to relationships, especially with a man who can't admit he still wants you back, that silence can tell you the whole story if you're willing to listen. See, most people expect closure in the form of words. I was wrong. I want you back. But the reality is, those words rarely ever come. What comes instead are the signals, the little patterns, the things he thinks you won't notice, but you do. He can't admit it, but his silence is already confessing everything. Let me tell you something. Men are wired in a way where admitting vulnerability feels like surrender. And for a lot of them, that's unbearable. It's like walking into a ring with no gloves. So, instead of walking up to you and saying, "Hey, I messed up. I still think about you every night," he does this dance. This little quiet performance that, if you pay attention, reveals he hasn't really let you go. Think about it. Why does he still watch your stories on social media? Why does he pop up in places where he knows you'll be and then act like it's some big coincidence? Why does he send that one random, "Hey, how you doing?" text after months of silence? It's not because he's bored. It's because silence can only hold back desire for so long before it leaks out in little ways. Now, some of you might brush it off and say, "Oh, he's just being friendly." But deep down, you know better. Because if he truly didn't care, if he truly moved on, there wouldn't be these small breadcrumbs left behind. Silence would mean disappearance. No checking in, no watching, no accidental encounters. But that's not what's happening here. See, pride is a powerful thing. It tells a man to bite his tongue, to keep his feelings locked up tight. But the heart doesn't follow the rules pride sets. The heart betrays him every single time he lingers too long on your page, or when he hesitates to delete your number. And that's the paradox. His silence is actually his confession. Let's break this down a little deeper. There's a psychological concept called displacement. When people can't express what they truly feel directly, they express it indirectly through behavior, through subtle actions. That's what's happening here. He can't bring himself to say, "I want you back," but he'll show up in your digital world, in your physical world, in ways that keep him tethered to you. It's not just chance. It's strategy, whether he realizes it or not. And let's be honest, sometimes silence feels safer to him than honesty. Words lock you into a position. If he says, "I want you back," then suddenly he's vulnerable. He's at your mercy, but if he stays quiet and just hovers, He gets to feed his longing without risking rejection. It's the coward's way of staying close without admitting the truth. Now, here's where most people get it twisted. They think silence equals indifference. But in relationships, silence rarely equals indifference. Silence usually equals conflict, internal conflict. That man is wrestling with his pride, his regret, his desire, and his fear all at once. He wants you, but he doesn't want to lose face. He misses you, but he doesn't want to look weak. That's why his silence isn't empty. It's heavy. And you feel that weight, even if you can't always explain it. Let me give you a real example. I've seen men break up with women and act like they're perfectly fine. Weeks go by, months even. The woman thinks, he must be over me. But then out of nowhere, he's commenting on an old picture or liking posts from 2 years ago. That ain't random. That's a man whose silence couldn't hold anymore. That's desire leaking through the cracks of his pride. And if you're the one on the receiving end, you've got to understand something important. Silence is a language. If you learn to interpret it, you'll never be confused again. Every time he lingers in your orbit without committing, he's speaking. Every time he disappears, but then comes back, he's speaking. Every time he avoids the truth, but still clings to the edges of your life, he's speaking. And what he's saying is simple. I can't admit it, but I still want you back. But here's the real question. Why does that matter to you? Because you're not supposed to spend your life decoding someone else's silence. You're supposed to recognize it for what it is, and then decide if you're willing to play that game or not. Because let's be clear, his silence is not your responsibility to fix, it's his burden to carry. The danger is, too many people start romanticizing silence. They say, well, he hasn't said anything, but I can feel he still cares. And then they hold on, waiting for him to finally admit it. But let me tell you the truth. Sometimes silence is all you're ever going to get. Sometimes the closest thing to an apology, or a confession, or a reunion is just the breadcrumbs he leaves behind. And if you build your hope on breadcrumbs, you'll starve yourself emotionally. You'll start thinking his small signals mean big promises, but they don't. They only mean he hasn't let go. That's all. It doesn't mean, they'll mean he's ready to grow. It doesn't mean he's ready to love you the way you deserve. It just means he's stuck in that limbo where pride and desire are fighting it out. So you've got to be wise enough to say, I hear your silence, but I don't have to live in it. But I don't have to live in it. You've got to recognize that a man who can't admit his feelings is also a man who might not be ready to act on them. And love, real love, requires more than signals. It requires courage. I want you to walk away from this with one thought engraved in your mind. Pay attention to silence, but don't let it trap you. Yes, his silence speaks louder than his words, but your response speaks louder than his silence. The power has shifted to you now, and that's where the reflection comes in. Because this isn't just about him not admitting what he feels. This is about you recognizing your own value. You don't need his confession to validate what you already sense. You don't need his words to prove your worth. You're not waiting for him to speak. Waiting for him to speak. You're deciding how to live regardless of what he says or doesn't say. So the next time his silence shows up, through those little behaviors, those half efforts, those unspoken signals, I want you to remember this silence is a confession, not a commitment. It reveals the truth, but it doesn't guarantee the future. And you deserve more than unspoken feelings. You deserve a man who isn't afraid to put words to his heart. Who isn't afraid to look you in the eye and say, I want you? Until that happens, silence will always be what it is. An echo of desire trapped inside pride. Don't build your life around that echo. Build your life around the voice of someone who has the courage to love you out loud. Because at the end of the day, the loudest truth isn't in his silence, it's in your decision to no longer be defined by it. His silence may scream, but it's not your responsibility to answer for him. Your power lies in recognizing it for what it is and choosing to live louder than the words he'll never say. You know what's crazy? A man can want you back with every fiber of his being, but he still won't say it. Not because he doesn't feel it. Not because he doesn't think about you, but because he's locked inside something stronger than longing. He's locked inside pride. And let me tell you, pride is a prison. You've seen it before. A man will sit there, miserable without you, scrolling through pictures he shouldn't still have, replaying old conversations in his head, instead of picking up the phone. Baby, I messed up, I need you back. He sits in silence. Why? Because pride whispers in his ear, don't let her see you weak. Don't admit you were wrong. Don't give her that power. That's what pride does. It builds walls. Walls so high, so thick, that even love can't climb over them. Now, I'm not saying men are the only ones who struggle with pride, but let's be real. Society trains men to see vulnerability as weakness. From the time they're boys, they're told, don't cry, don't show emotion, don't let anybody know you're hurting. And by the time they become grown men, that lesson has hardened. So even when they lose the best thing that's ever happened to them, they'll bite their tongue rather than admit regret. But here's the truth. That pride is costing them everything. You ever seen somebody too proud to apologize? Too proud to reach out? too proud to say, "I miss you." That's not strength. That's fear wearing a disguise. Pride is nothing but fear dressed up in a suit. Fear of rejection, fear of humiliation, fear of being exposed. So instead of facing those fears, he hides behind pride. Now, let me break it down a little deeper. Psychologically, pride acts like armor. It makes him feel safe. If he never admits he wants you back, then technically, you never get the chance to turn him down. If he never says, "I miss you," then he never has to risk you saying, "Well, I don't miss you." That armor protects him, but it also imprisons him, because the same walls that keep out rejection also keep out reconciliation. That's the tragedy of pride. It convinces you're winning while you're actually losing. It makes you you're protecting yourself when really you're sabotaging yourself. So let's go back to that man who still wants you back but won't admit it. He'll watch you, he'll linger around, he'll drop little hints, but he won't say the words. Why? Because if he says them, he risks everything, and his pride just won't let him take that risk. He'd rather suffer in silence than look weak. And here's the kicker: that silence doesn't just hurt you, it hurts him too. Because pride keeps him stuck. It won't let him grow. It won't let him evolve. It won't let him break free and truly love. He's locked in a self-made prison where the only guard is his own ego. But here's where it gets deep. Pride isn't just about ego, it's about identity. If a man believes admitting you wants you back makes him less of a man, then of course he'll resist it. He's protecting his identity. But what he doesn't realize is that real strength isn't in denying your feelings. It's in owning them. Real courage isn't in pretending you don't care. It's in saying, "I care, even if it costs me." That's manhood. That's maturity. Let me give you a story. I once knew a man who lost the love of his life because of pride. He cheated, she left, and deep down he knew he messed up. Every night he thought about calling her. He'd rehearse what he would say: "Baby, I was wrong. I can't live without you." But he never made that call. Instead, he drank, he dated other women, he acted like he was fine. And years later, he admitted privately that he never stopped loving her. But by then, it was too late. She had moved on. His pride robbed him of his second chance. That's the danger. Pride doesn't just hurt the relationship, it steals time you'll never get back. Now, let's shift perspective for a moment. Because some of you are sitting here wondering, okay, if pride is his prison, what am I supposed to do with that? How do I respond? And the answer is, you don't. You don't. You can't fix pride for him. You can't tear down those walls for him. That's his battle. That's his burden. Your job isn't to wait outside the prison doors, hoping one day he breaks free. Your job is to recognize the prison for what it is and to decide whether you're willing to be dragged into it with him. Because pride is contagious. If you're not careful, his inability to admit he wants you back will turn into your inability to move forward. See, when you understand pride as a prison, you stop romanticizing his silence. You stop interpreting his little breadcrumbs as love letters. You start to see it for what it really is. A man who would rather suffer than surrender his ego. And you have to ask yourself, is that the kind of love you want to build your life on? Because love can't live in prison. Love requires freedom. Love requires honesty. Love requires courage. If he can't find that courage, then he's not ready for love, not the kind that lasts. Anyway, now let me make this plain. Some men do break free from pride. Some men hit that moment where the pain of silence becomes heavier than the risk of rejection. That's when they finally say, you know what? I don't care how it looks. I love her. I need her. I'm going after her. And when that happens, you see real transformation. But until then, pride is in control. And here's the part that matters for you. You can't afford to wait around hoping he'll reach that point. Because while he's locked in pride, life is moving forward. You're growing. You're healing. You're stepping into new opportunities. You can't hit pause on your future because someone else is stuck in their prison. So when you see that man who can't admit he wants you back, don't get caught up in the signals. Don't spend your nights wondering why he won't just say it. The answer is simple. Pride is his prison, and only he holds the key. The question is, are you going to stand outside those walls forever, or are you going to walk away and build a life with someone who isn't afraid to love you out loud? Because listen, life is too short to settle for someone who loves you in silence. Life is too short to wait on someone who values pride more than they value your heart. You deserve love that's free, love that's bold, love that's unashamed, love that looks you in the eye and says, I want you. I'm not afraid to admit it. I'm not afraid to risk it. So let him sit in his prison he wants to, but don't you sit there with him. Don't let his pride hold you hostage. At the end of the day, the truth is simple. A man's pride may keep him from admitting he wants you back, but your wisdom can keep you from being trapped by his silence. Don't waste your life waiting outside someone else's prison. Pride may chain him down, but you've got the freedom to walk away, to rise higher, and to choose a love that doesn't hide behind walls. Now let's talk about the real reason he can't admit it. Hawasuli the weakest. The reason he still circles back in his mind, even if he'll never say it out loud. And that reason is simple. You. See, the thing about love and loss is this. When you step out of someone's life, it creates a void, and that void can't be filled with just anybody. He can go out, date around, laugh with new people, even pretend to move on. But when the dust settles, he knows deep down there was something about you he can't replace. And that's when it hits him. That's when he realizes he wants you back. Not because you're sitting around begging for him. Not because you chased him, but because your value spoke louder than his pride. Now, let me tell you something important. Value isn't just about looks. Looks fade. Value is about energy. It's about presence. It's about the way you make a man feel about himself when he's around you. It's the encouragement, the laughter, the stability, the inspiration you bring. And when he loses that, suddenly life feels a little emptier. See? Men don't always recognize value while they have it. Sometimes it takes losing it to see it clearly. It's like driving a car. You don't think twice about how smooth the engine runs until one day the car breaks down. Then you realize, man, I had something good. That's what happens when you walk away. He realizes you weren't just another person. You were a source of life. And here's the truth he'll never say out loud. When he sees you thriving without him, it eats at him. Oh, he won't admit it. But every time he sees you looking good, moving forward, glowing in your own success, he feels that ache inside. Because pride told him he could live without you. But reality shows him that you were the one thing he couldn't replace. Now, let's break this down psychologically. There's a concept called cognitive dissonance. It's when your actions and your beliefs don't line up, and it creates tension in your mind. For him, pride tells him, I don't need her. I'm fine. But then he sees you flourishing, sees your worth shining brighter than ever, and suddenly his heart says, man, I made the biggest mistake of my life. That dissonance eats him alive. And here's the best part. You don't have to do anything to trigger it. Just by living, just by the best version of yourself, you remind him of your value. He can't escape it. Every time you level up, every time you smile without him, every time you succeed, his mind runs back to you, because the truth is, his memory can't bury your value. And let me tell you, that's a powerful place for you to be, because it means you don't have to chase, don't have to beg, you don't have to lower yourself to pull him out of his pride. Your worth does all the talking. But here's the caution. You can't start living your life just to prove your value to him. Weakest, that's not empowerment. That's still centering your life around his opinion. The point isn't to make him regret it. The point is to recognize your value for yourself. Because when you know your worth, you don't need his confession to validate it. You ever notice how success is the loudest revenge? Not petty revenge. Not trying to show off to make him jealous. No, I'm talking about genuine growth. When you're walking in your purpose, building your dreams, loving yourself the way you deserve, that speaks louder than any speech you could give. And whether he admits it or not, he sees it. And it stings. Now let's get philosophical for a second. Value is one of those things that exists whether people recognize it or not. A diamond is still a diamond, even if someone mistakes it for a rock. Your worth doesn't shrink because he was too blind to see it at the time. All that happens is he walks away, thinking he left behind a stone, and later realizes he abandoned a diamond. And that realization, that regret, that's what makes him return in his mind. But here's where you've got to be smart. Just because he recognizes your value now doesn't mean he's ready to honor it. There's a difference between missing you and being ready for you. He might long for the comfort, the love, the energy you gave him, unless he's grown past his pride, unless he's truly changed. He's not coming back to love you better. He's just coming back to feed off what you bring. And that's why you can't let his silent obsession control your future. Yes, your value makes him want you back in his mind, but the question isn't whether he sees it. The question is whether you see it. Do you know your worth without needing his recognition? Because when you do, that's when everything changes. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine two women. The first one hears through the grapevine that her ex still talks about her, still thinks about her, still can't let her go. And she clings to that thinking, maybe he'll come back. He still loves me. So she waits. She puts her life on hold. She keeps the door cracked open just in case. The second woman, she hears the same thing, but she laughs, not out of arrogance, but out of clarity. She says, of course he still thinks about me. I'm unforgettable, but that doesn't mean I need to stand still. My value isn't a ticket back into my life. My value is the reason I keep moving forward. And because of that, she thrives. Which one do you want to be? Because I'll tell you this, when you recognize your value, you stop being surprised when people regret losing you. You stop wondering why he still hovers around your life. Of course he does. Value demands attention. Value can't be forgotten, but you've got to decide, does his recognition add to your life? Or are you strong enough to live without it? And let's be honest, there's nothing more powerful than a person who knows their worth. Nothing. Because when you know your worth, you stop negotiating with people who can't see it. You stop chasing validation. You stop waiting for prideful people to finally confess what you already knew. So yes, he wants you back in his mind. Yes, he feels the ache of losing someone valuable. But let that be your reason to look back. Let it be your reminder to keep moving forward. Because the best thing you can do isn't to to wait for him to admit it. It's to live in a way that proves you never needed him to. I want you to remember this. Your value is constant. It doesn't increase when he notices it. It doesn't decrease when he ignores it. It just is. And the more you live in alignment with it, the more the world adjusts around you. So let him circle in his mind. Let him wrestle with the void he created. Let him live with the realization that his pride cost him something priceless. That's his journey. Yours is to keep shining, keep rising, keep building the life you deserve. Because here's the ultimate truth. Your value isn't what makes him want you back. Your value makes you unstoppable whether he comes back or not. Your value doesn't live in his memory. It lives in you. So let him replay the past if he wants. But you keep creating a future that proves you were always worth more than his silence. Now let me give you the bigger picture. Everything I've said so far, his silence, his pride, the way your value lingers in his mind, those aren't random pieces. They're connected. They're part of the same cycle men fall into when they lose someone they never thought they'd lose. First comes the silence. That's his way of avoiding the truth. He doesn't say anything because saying something makes it real. Then comes the pride. That's the armor, the walls, the excuses. That's what stops him from stepping forward. And then, when he's finally alone long enough to realize what he had, your value comes rushing back into focus. That's when he starts living in his mind, replaying moments, wishing he could go back. And here's crazy part. He could break that cycle at any point if he had the courage, but most men don't. Why? Because courage requires humility, and humility is the one thing pride won't allow. So instead, he stays trapped. And meanwhile, you're sitting here trying to decode him, wondering, does he still love me? Does he want me back? Why doesn't he just say it? And the answer is, yes, he does. But he may never admit it, because admitting it means confronting himself. And most people would rather wrestle with loss than wrestle with themselves. That's why this speech isn't really about him, it's about you. See, you can't control his silence. You can't tear down his pride. You can't force him to honor your value, but you can decide how you're going to live in the middle of it. And that decision, that's where your freedom lies. Now let's get real for a second. I know some of you listening right now are holding on to hope. You're saying, well, maybe one day he'll change. Maybe one day he'll humble himself. Maybe one day he'll admit he still wants me. And maybe he will. I'm not here to crush that possibility. People can change. Men can grow. But you can't put your life on a maybe. You can't sit in emotional limbo, waiting for somebody else to get their act together. Because while you're waiting, you're losing time. Time is the one thing you don't get back. You can make more money. You can build new relationships. You can recover from mistakes. You can't create more time. And every second you spend waiting on his silence to turn into words as a second, you could have been building your future. That's why self-respect is so important. Because self-respect says, I hear your silence, I see your pride, I know you miss me, but I'm not stopping my life for you. Self-respect says, I'm valuable whether you recognize it or not, and let me tell you, nothing drives a man crazier than seeing the woman he couldn't admit he loved standing tall, thriving, unbothered. That's when it hits him hardest. That's when the regret sinks in. Because deep down, he knows he didn't just lose you. He lost his chance to grow with you. But here's the thing. You can't live your life for his regret. That's not freedom. That's still letting his silence dictate your story. Real freedom is when you say, I'm not waiting for you to figure it out. I've already figured it out for myself. And what you've figured out is this: love requires reciprocity. It's not enough for him to secretly want you back. It's not enough for him to replay you in his mind. If he can't step forward with honesty, with courage, with action, then he's not ready for the kind of love you deserve. Let's take this a little deeper. There's a philosophical idea that says, desire without action is nothing but fantasy. And that's exactly what this situation is. Yes, he desires you. Yes, he wants you back. But if it stays locked in his mind, it's nothing more than fantasy. And you cannot build your life on someone else's fantasy. What you need is reality. What you need doesn't just think about you when they're alone at night, but someone who shows up in the daylight and says, I choose you. I'm here. I'm not afraid to admit it. That's real. That's love in action. So let's flip this whole thing around. Instead of asking, why can't he admit he wants me back? Start asking, why should I wait for someone who won't? Instead of wondering, does he still love me? Start affirming, I'm lovable whether he does or not. Because the truth is, the moment you stop centering him, everything changes. The moment you stop trying to decode his silence, stop being distracted by his pride, stop waiting for him to honor your value, the power shifts back to you. And when the power shifts back to you, you realize something life-changing. You were never the one who needed to prove anything. He was. And that's the reflection I want to leave you with. You don't win in this situation by getting him back. You win by understanding your worth so deeply that whether he comes back or not doesn't shake you. You win by realizing his silence doesn't define you. His pride doesn't imprison you. And his regret doesn't empower you. You win by living your life fully, freely, boldly, because that's what you were created to do. And if by chance One day, he breaks free of his pride and comes to you with honesty. Then you'll be ready to decide, not from a place of desperation, but from a place of strength. You'll be able to look him in the eye and say, I know you want me back. The question is, are you ready to love me the way I deserve? And if the answer is no, you keep walking. Because the truth is, you've already won. His silence may speak. His pride may block him. His mind may return to you. But your power is in knowing your worth. Doesn't depend on any of that. Live your life boldly. Love yourself deeply. And let your value be the loudest voice in the room.